Hello everyone. Today I'll be making a guide on the OSI model and breaking down each layer and what they mean. So what is the OSI model? The OSI model is the consensus or best visual representation on how a computer communicates and works. Starting off, there are 7 layers to the OSI model, and beginning with one which is named the physical layer. The physical layer is pretty self-explanatory. It's pretty much any physical piece of hardware like an Ethernet cable or a switch, router, anything you can get your hands on. Another thing I want to note with the physical layer is that it also deals with bits. So this is a key word here, bits. And what are bits? Those are those zeros and ones that you see on screen or like in a hacker movie. Computers talk in zeros and ones known as bits. So if you're ever in the real world dealing with physical hardware or in bits, then you know you're in the physical layer. Moving on to layer 2, which is the data link layer. So what's in layer 2? What I like to remember layer 2 by is frames and switches. So those are my two keywords for layer 2, the data link layer, which is frames and switches. So I got a little picture here of this little 2-port switch and just a general picture of a frame. So the OSI model actually communicates. It goes top down and then bottom up. So if it receives some information in bits and the physical layer, it'll then go up and get framed with a MAC address and then move on up until the user, which is above the application layer. And then let's say that the user sends down information and it goes down. When it hits layer 3 and sends it to layer 2, it'll then translate that, assign a MAC address to that, translate it to bits, and then it'll go on its way. So MAC addresses are also in the data link layer. And then again, from earlier, I like to remind myself that if I ever see a question or in the real life world, I like to remind myself that if I see the word frames or switches, that being with hubs and bridges as well, I know I'm in the data link layer. So moving on to layer 3, which is the network layer. So what is the network layer? It's actually pretty similar to the data link layer, except that it deals with packets. And I like to remember by imagining a little envelope here to remind myself that layer 3 is packets. And with that, the layer 3 also is routers. And here's like a little home router as example. So how does layer 3 or the network layer really tie into everything? So if the user above layer 7 sends information down, it hits layer 3 and it's going to route the information down and then going through or route the information to where it needs to go, and vice versa, going back up, it's going to route that information. So routing, route is a pretty key term. So if you ever see that in a question maybe, or in real life you hear the term routing, packets, routers, you know that you're in the network layer. Moving on to layer 4, which is the transport layer. And I'm actually going to talk about layer 5 first because I believe it's going to help me talk first, but that's the session layer. So what I like to remember this session layer by is the path. So how is that data going to get there, or where is that going to go? I also like to think of tunnel is a pretty common word when referring to the session layer. And so with that, the transport layer is going to be how that data is sent through that path or through that tunnel. So I like to think of how the data is going to be sent. And some real life examples of that are TCP and UDP protocols. And what those are, your TCP is going to be like your guaranteed sent message. So it guarantees that data is going to be sent. So um, while UDP is going for that high speed, not guaranteed data transfer. So where you might actually see UDP is when you're using YouTube or like streaming a show and you ever get that buffering message. That's actually UDP sending that data fast and it's not getting that guaranteed success. So that's when UDP actually you see in real life. And what I like to remember this by, and like a real life example as well, is Google Maps. So the session layer I like to relate to Google Maps. Google Maps is going to tell me where to go, what directions I need to go. So that's the session layer. It's going to tell me where to go, while the transport layer is going to tell me, do I take a car or do I take a plane? So how is that data going to get there? And so how does this all coincide together? Let's say data is coming up bottom up first. It goes through the first three. The transport layer is going to determine how that data is sent. The session layer is going to create the tunnel and it's going to send that data through, and then the session layer will end that. So the session layer deals with zero with sending data at all. It's just purely for the creation of the path and ending of the path, while the transport layer is going to actually send that data. And then vice versa, top down, session layer is going to create the path tunnel, and then the transport layer is going to determine how it's sent. Then it's going to go down the tree, routing, frames, all that. We're near the end here, but layer 6 is going to be the presentation layer. And what I like to remember this by, as it's pretty self-explanatory, but the presentation layer I like to think of is file extensions. So I have a school.pdf file here, and that process of .pdf of encrypting or compressing it down to a PDF file is the presentation layer. Or another example you might see is a video file or a .mp4. It's another example of the presentation. So these two files here are representing themselves as a PDF file and an MP4 file. So when you open that, the process of opening it and converting it to a PDF file on opening to become readable is the presentation layer. Last but not least, we have the application layer here. So what is the application layer, or what do I think of it? I think of HRF. And what does that mean? It means human readable format. So it's the end stage of anything like a school.pdf file, or the part where you can read, interact with it, and understand it. So this layer 7 is actually the closest to the user itself. So any input is going to be into the application layer. So a common thing I also like to think of is browsers. So Chrome, Edge, Firefox. And so with that, a common protocol is HTTP. So if you ever see browsers, HTTP, you know you're working with the application layer, that direct input. So how does that coincide OSI model all together? So coming from the bottom up, bits enter your computer. It then gets framed with a MAC address. It then gets sent to the transport layer where it is routed in a packet to the transport layer, which says it is going to be UDP. The session layer creates the session. It then sends the data. The session layer cuts off the tunnel. The presentation layer says, oh, this is a school.pdf file. It is then compressed to this right here, user opens school.pdf file is then presented in the human readable format to where I can edit and make changes. Let's go top down. School.pdf is already open. We enter some text. It is then compressed back down to school.pdf file when we close it, meaning that is the presentation layer. The session layer is going to be open because we're sending it to a friend. The transport layer decides we're going to send it TCP because we want to guarantee transmission down to layer 3, where it is then in a packet sent down to layer 2 and routed. Layer 2 then translate that to bits with a MAC address, and it goes on its way to his buddy for editing school turn-in.